I think coming out of the war on terror, because if you look at the timing, right, they started putting all the toys away 2012, right? 2000, during the Obama years, they start boxing everything up. All right, everybody, we're no longer going to be so operationally focused on war. Now we're going to be more focused on, I'd say, the rules of the sea, right? What do the rules of the sea look like? And what are the rules when it comes to resources? And what are the rules when it comes to freedom of navigation and all those
Sure.
things, right? Because meanwhile, China's freaking building islands in the middle of the ocean and
Yeah.
laying claim to our friends' resources, right? And claiming things. And so, but then as they're doing that, people started getting willy-nilly with their focus and started taking freebies. And what they forgot was that technology in the war on terror was like neck and neck, right? Like it
Yeah.
was like they used the war on terror to really ramp money in the technology field. So I remember we went from having Blackberries and Nextels to freaking in like 8 years, right? Technology flew, and Japan was always ahead of all that anyway, right? We had phones in Japan that people didn't have in the States years ahead of time because the technology was flying. And then people just idle hands, and then people really thinking they were that. I remember being in a change of command in Japan. Well, George Washington, and it was 2012. And the hats the ladies were wearing, you would think they were at the Kentucky Derby, right? You would think, because it's like I tell people sometimes being in Japan is like what it would have been like to be in Pearl Harbor before the attack in World War II, right? Like where the military leadership was the aristocrats of the island. They were the leaders. And if you were a politician, you wanted to be involved with the leaders of the military. And who's who in the zoo. I remember we were at the change of command of George Washington, and my chief engineer didn't know how to do the sword thing because he was an ROTC, not a Naval Academy guy. And so he's like trying to work on the sword thing. Well, my DCA was former enlisted who went to the Naval Academy.
Mm.
And now he's an 04. He's a freaking shaker and mover, right? He's a ring knocker in their world. And I remember DCA goes walking by. The DCA signed up to escort people to their seats, right? As an 04. He goes walking by, escorting his wife to a seat. And Chang was doing a sword, practicing a sword. He's like, what the hell is she doing here? Why is she here? What? She can't. DCA was like, right? Because he was moving, and he went from being the DCA at George Washington to ATG Westpac director of training, right? And he was working those angles. And unfortunately, sometimes in those kinds of environments, people will start believing the hype. They'll start thinking they can get away with stuff. And then once that domino falls, it all starts coming out, right?
Oh yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it took down many out. It's an interesting story. And man, did it give the Navy a bad rep. I think that's the hardest part is like, you think about taxpayers, you think about people send their kids off to the military, pick a branch. It's the safest, most ethically honest organization. And then Fat Leonard breaks, and you realize how many people took gifts. And, we've always had ethics in the military. We always have. And whether or not you choose to take those ethics or believe by those ethics was a choice. Even today, it's a choice.